sides and just the seeming general level of chaos that's kind of...
Kidnapping.
All of it. Animals attacking and... So is it... I mean, in a way, it is the war on the consciousness. And in a way, it is...
It's to keep us in a state of fear.
What you call psychic dictatorship.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's what all that's about. And while Obama's in office, this is going to go on and on.
Okay, so now we've mentioned Obama, and we've seen what hasn't changed. And the only thing that sometimes gives me a little bit of hope is that hopefully the well-meaning left are already realizing that they've been screwed. Perhaps it's much, much too late for that. But where do you see us going under the new change agent?
I think we're going to head in exactly the direction that was established by the Bush regime. I think we're going to see very little variation. He's already increased the military budget. He's making excuses for torture. He's holding back on evidence. After the CIA burned photographs, and you know what's in those photographs? At Abu Ghraib, you had children who were raped in front of their parents. Let's see those photographs, right? Let's get that out there. Let's get that information out there. It doesn't come. All you hear about is waterboarding. And there's a lot more to this than waterboarding. That's just the beginning. The CIA did not just begin waterboarding. They've been doing it since the Vietnam War. Jimi Hendrix died with his lungs full of red wine. You can call that a form of waterboarding. They just held him down and forced red wine down his throat until he drowned. His stomach and his lungs were full of wine.
Now
that was waterboarding taken to the extreme.
That kind of brings me to where I maybe also wanted to touch on. And I have been reading your book that's called The Covert War Against Rock. And this may seem out of left field, but in a way, it signifies something to me. Today in the news, we had the big story break that AT&T perhaps helped rig the American Idol vote. Now, that may seem like a ridiculous thing to bring up, and in a way it is, but it's had me thinking about what in the past were legitimate artists with a real pertinent message, and not only that, an amazing amount of power with the mass amounts of people, especially in the cases of folks like John Lennon or even Tupac Shakur. Have we gotten to the point now where we don't really have outspoken rock stars to get rid of anymore because they're all complete corporate pop idols?
Well, they made a big mistake back then, and that's because the word revolution became current. Became widespread, and these guys talked openly about political revolution. And those were at the top of the list to be eliminated because let's say that you're working for the FBI, and you hear these guys out there talking about overthrowing and killing you and so forth, you're not going to like it, and you're going to do something about it. And it just happened to be those particular rock celebrities who were talking about overthrowing the government who died, if you notice. John Lennon among them. But you also had Tupac Shakur, who was a Black Panther. He had his own little Black Panther party. His parents were Black Panthers, and 28 of the Black Panthers use that word a lot, too. And they all ended up dead because FBI and local police slaughtered 28 Black Panthers. Tupac makes 29. You also had, just at random, you had, let me see here. Remind me of some of the people in the book.
Well, there's, I know the one that, of course, kind of caught my attention. I was always the biggest NXS fan. And so I've always found the death of Michael Hutchence very strange.
That's an incredible story. Michael Hutchence didn't have a dime to his name, right, when he died. And that seems impossible until you look into it and find out that his accountant was working for the mafia, and that all his funds were being passed off to the mafia, while on paper, Michael Hutchence was worth millions of dollars. Actually, when you got down to it, all he had was the money in his pocket that his accountant gave him, and that's what he was worth when he died. after the mafia stole all his money and all his property. He thought that he owned a bowling alley in Australia, and then it turns out that bowling alley was being used to refine heroin, and that heroin was distributed throughout Europe. Michael Hutchins didn't know anything about this, but I think he was catching on, and that's about the time he was found hanging from his doorknob.
Jesus, with of course now the official story was that it was autoerotic asphyxiation gone wrong, but his hand was busted, and
it makes him look silly and thoughtless and stupid. And he ends up dead, and of course when they kill these people, they end up smeared at the same time. Supposedly Jimi Hendrix died of a heroin overdose. That's so we blame the victim.
Mama Cass choked on a ham sandwich.
Yeah, there you go. See,
and of course, and again, those are the ones that I know. Growing up, didn't know anything about it, but you just hear that and you take that as that's what it is. Choked on a ham sandwich.
Little known fact: Mama Cass was going to run for Congress.
So, again, going to become even more politically active.
That's right. So, they didn't like her. They don't like these rock stars in general. They don't like their lifestyle. They don't like their hair. They don't like their habits, their living habits. But especially, they don't like being threatened by them. And
there's no other, I think, form of, whether it's celebrity or artist or idol or whatever you want to call it, that has the amazing power that musicians do.
That's right. I mean, one Bob Marley is worth 1,000 propagandists.
Absolutely. So, do you see, I guess I in a way, maybe looking on your comment on the current sorry state of popular media, but is it, I think it probably is. Maybe that's the answer to my own question. The American idolization. It is the psychic dictatorship. It's you're willingly participating in your own manipulation. Your arm's not being twisted, but you sit down however many times a week it is and check out the latest show. Now, with this big scandal about AT&T maybe rigging the vote, let's see if the outrage, is half as large as perhaps when our elections. Yeah,
they don't get mad about anything else, and that's conditioning. But yeah, they'll get mad about things like that.
That ultimately, yeah, exactly. And you'll get more people involved in something like that would never get actively involved in politics.
That's right. But they keep them. I can see it. I mean, the public is confused. Let's take the Kennedy assassination. I go to the bookstore, I'm going to find 15 different books on the Kennedy assassination, pointing fingers in all different directions. But I think if you took a poll, you'd find that the current consensus is that the mafia did it. Now, if you just that alone is to say the intelligence services did it, because the CIA's been working with the mafia since World War II, right? The OSS was tied in with the mafia to sabotage Mussolini and so forth. And that was called Operation Underworld, and it's still with us, and the mafia begins in Washington, D.C. But, the public believes that it had something to do with the mafia, some of these Castro people and so forth. And you look at the History Channel, that's what they're telling you, that's what the books are telling you, that's what the Internet's telling you, and that's totally false. The mafia was pretty much on the periphery of the whole thing, and they were only used as pieces on a chessboard, because the two generals who conceived the Kennedy assassination started up as soon as Kennedy became president. That means that the motive was not what Kennedy intended to do in Vietnam. It was not what he intended to do with the CIA. It was the fact that he became president, that he won the election over Richard Nixon. You see my point?
Absolutely.
It was because he gained power that he had to go, and the chess pieces started to move as soon as he became president. That means Oswald gets sent overseas. A lot of false leads are planted, and if you try to follow up on those leads, they go in seven different directions. All of them seem plausible, but there's only one path that puts it all together for you, and that's if you begin with the Minutemen, the local Minutemen, like the Birch Society, the Liberty Lobby, in coordination with the CIA, and then you get down to the bolts, the nuts and bolts of the assassination. The rest of it is just misdirection. But the public picks up one book, they watch one TV show, and they watch another, and they end up totally confused, and that's by design.
I definitely believe so much of it is by design. I know I often refer to, I've always just, the whole thing that turned me on to researching 9/11 and thus down the rabbit hole of everything else was I just wanted to see the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. And if they would release that, then people like me would have to shut up, because maybe they showed and maybe who the hell knows, something hit it. And maybe I was wrong.
Right.
But to not focus on that, and that's the thing, so many of the peripheral events are the real kind of window dressing. I believe, in a way, that the collapse of the towers themselves are kind of the big eye-catching thing that all the conspiracy theorists talk about, and even when people who are, so-called 9/11 truth and all, that's basically what they focus on. But I think that is the magician's baton twirling around, while, again, the more sinister forces are perhaps at work below.
Well, it's left enough questions that it's bred a whole generation of researchers. And I was glad to see that happen.
Okay, and I was going to actually broach that topic, because I'm definitely one of those. I'm one of those, tons of people who got turned on to 9/11 at the same time the internet and podcasting and websites and all these things became virtually free to do. Mm-hmm. And
well, there weren't many of us out there really before 9/11, and now there's like thousands out there. And I'm so impressed with the work they're doing.
Well, that's great to hear, because I sometimes worry that with so many people sometimes just throwing shit up against the wall and see what sticks.
Well, there's some of that.
There is some of that.
The way I experienced it, it takes about 3 years before you have a foundation for this work, and that's 3 years of hard labor, right? Before you're really ready to start doing this in any sort of public capacity. And one reason for that is because they put so many landmines in the road. The stuff they call conspiracy theory is mostly planted information. That's coming from intelligence fronts.
And that, I feel, is the potholes and the traps of the UFOs and the chupacabras and all of that. And also, I think, all of the infighting. And I like this radio host and all that garbage that I personally don't get involved in. Exactly. Not a member of any group. I do this by myself.
Exactly. But I think there's a tendency to latch onto experts. And that's where people go wrong, because they latch onto the wrong people. They find Lyndon LaRouche or the Burt Society, and they start believing that, and it takes them a while to work their way out of that maze. Then they find the next one, they have to work out of that maze, and then eventually they're thinking for themselves. And you'll find them passionate about their beliefs at every step along the way. And so it's, they're an irate bunch of people to begin with. They don't like being lied to. They're very bitter about what's happening. They want to put a stop to it, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication to really start putting things together as they should be reconstructed. And people start right away. They get on the internet, they start gathering information, and they believe in what they're doing, and it may take some time to work out of it, but they move on to the next thing and the next thing, and then eventually they get there. It helps. I found Mae Brussel a big help, because she takes all that crap out of it and gets down to the intelligence services, their interactions with the Nazi Party after the war, bringing the Nazis in the United States in scientific and technological capacities, also psychiatric. And she does it all in a documented fashion. She knows the ropes, and she never gets fooled. So, listen to some Mae Brussel on the internet, whenever you get, a compulsion to learn. And, start from there. At least, she's a good guide that can get people started. A lot better than most of the people I find on the internet.
Is it the nexus point, the World War II, CIA, OSS, Nazi? It seems that so many things point back to that being the sort of ground zero, the sort of festering wound that started so much. No, actually it starts way before that. Let's back up all the way to the beginning here, and I can get to it pretty quickly, and then you can see how it fits historically. This all begins really with the rise in industrialization. You have a middle class who
feel sorry for the lower classes because they're being subjected to all kinds